Okay, Chair, we're now streaming live on YouTube. I'll hand the meeting to yourself.
Thanks, Amanda. Good afternoon and welcome to East Devon District Council's Audit and Governance Committee on the 16th of March 2022. I'm the Chair, Councillor Sam Hawkins, and I'd like to welcome anyone watching the meeting via the live streaming. Based on the decision of the Council to continue virtual meetings until May 2022, I'd like to remind both members and the public attending or watching that this Council has delegated much of its decision-taking power to our senior officers. May I remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove, disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. In the event of a break in the internet connection, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we're not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called, and any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting the website www.eastdevon.gov.uk. And we will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present.
Thank you, Chair. I'll call yourself. Councillor Hawkins.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Barrow.
Yes, present. Thanks, Amanda.
Councillor Cahill. Councillor Haywood. Councillor Kemp.
Present. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm your quorum today.
Thank you. Agenda item 1, public speaking. There are no members of the public. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has a comment on the set of minutes from the 18th of November 2021 or the 20th of January 2022, please do this by raising your electronic hand. If I have no hands raised, I'll take this as an indication you agree to the minutes of the previous meeting. No, I can't see any hands, so thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting are recommended to be agreed. Agenda item 3, apologies. Amanda, I'll hand over to you because I imagine there's a list.
Yes, just a few. So I have had apologies, Chair, from Councillor Twiss, Councillor Pook, Councillor Hookway, Councillor Gazzard and Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. It's normally done by roll call, but given the small numbers, if anyone does have a declaration, could you raise your hand, please? Again, can't see any hands raised, so we'll take that as there are no declarations, but of course, if anyone becomes aware, then let us know throughout the course of the meeting. Agenda item 5, late items, matter of urgency, there are none. Agenda item 6, confidential or exempt items, and there are no such items. Agenda item 7, internal audit plan progress 2021 to 2022 swap. That's over to Alistair, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, councillors. So this is your regular update report on progress of the internal audit plan. So it's to provide an overview of where we are with our audit plan and raise any significant findings we've identified to your attention. So if you could first just scroll down to agenda page 16, this highlights the reviews that have completed since your last update in January. There are 2 limited assurance opinions and 2 follow-up audits that have been undertaken that I do need to bring to your attention. So moving on to agenda page 17, as members may be familiar, when conducting a piece of work, we offer an opinion on the effectiveness of the controls, but we also consider the weaknesses at a corporate level in terms of risk. So whilst there are 2 audits that did return a limited assurance opinion, the level of exposure at a corporate level in terms of risk isn't significant, so did not warrant a corporate risk assessment. So the first limited assurance review on here is the annual vehicle declaration and compliance. So this is in essence the fleet management review, which obviously this committee requested. So the weaknesses are laid out there on the page. So as you can see, the use of vehicles for personal use is prohibited and stated in the annual vehicle declaration, although vehicles can be taken home if that is more efficient for where they need to travel to the following day for work. The mobile app, if used correctly, would allow this use to be monitored. However, the app is not being used consistently, which obviously undermines this monitoring arrangement. So that's one of the weaknesses there. Also, communication on the use of council vehicles is in the annual vehicle declaration, so making sure that all officers have seen and signed that is also important, and there were some issues around staff signing that off and seeing it in a timely manner. So a full copy of this report is available on your audit document library, so you can see all the recommendations and all the report. And as ever, because we've given it limited assurance, it will be a review that we will follow up in due course to make sure those recommendations are implemented. Moving on to the second limited assurance, this is on agenda page 18. So continuing some of our themed work around procurement and contract management, we looked at small works and service contracts. And again, the reasons why we offered limited assurance are set out here on page 18. Again, a full copy of the report is available on the Audit Committee's document library, so you can see further details on this. And as we've given limited assurance, again, we will be following up on these recommendations throughout 22-23 in due course to make sure they have been implemented and to give you assurance that those control weaknesses have been identified. Have been rectified. Moving on to agenda page 19. So this is details of the follow-up review that we've done on FirmStep. So FirmStep is the system that's been implemented to enable digital transformation within East Devon. So it's allowing members of the public to self-serve online. It's effectively a digital form system, so data can be captured and people can self-serve. So we first looked at this review in May 2021, and we noted the project had stalled due to some staff absences or key staff absences. I mean, due to the impact of COVID-19, as you can see by the number of recommendations that have been implemented, progress has stalled, and senior management have taken the decision to defer further progress on this until September 22. So in light of that, we won't be following up any further on these recommendations until post 2022, when we'll be looking to do probably a more full-scale review at a later date to see that the benefits of the original project for why FirmStep was implemented are being achieved. And then the final follow-up audit to bring to your attention is on agenda page 20. This is the integrated asset management contract follow-up. So here, overall reasonable progress has been made on the recommendations that were raised earlier in the year on the integrated asset management contract. Whilst there has been some improvement around the KPIs, performance is still not where it needs to be. So on that basis, we would like to keep this area on our rolling plan for further consideration at a later date, possibly in 22-23 towards the end of the year or early into 23-24. Then if members can scroll down to agenda page 22. So again, it's just to highlight any changes to the audit plan that have been agreed since we last provided our update in January, and there are a few. So just to pick on here, obviously Seaton Jurassic Centre was discussed and it was agreed that that would be brought in for Q4, so that has come in. And the economic resilience review has been pushed and deferred into the 22-23 audit plan. There are a few other deferrals that have happened, mainly due to COVID grant work that's come in throughout Q4, obviously with the Omicron grants. So that's meant a number of audits have just been scheduled back into the 22-23 audit plan. And finally, I guess just to give you an overview, agenda pages 24 through to 27 provides you an overview of the audit plans and the individual audits that we've undertaken throughout this year. It gives you a status of where they are, what opinion is given, and the number and value of the recommendations that have been awarded. And again, it's useful for members just to make sure you've got oversight of that, so you know where we are undertaking work and where the assurance is coming from, to make sure that you're comfortable with the coverage and whether there's any other areas that should be included. So as I say, that's it from me. I don't have anything else to update you on. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And I think we've got Andrew with us to talk about the fleet, the annual vehicle declaration. Before I drop anybody in it, I will check. Andrew, is that what you're looking to cover?
Yes.
Or mention? Update,
yeah, well, I'm here to take questions from you if you have any, but I can also give you an overview of the fleet checks if you wish.
Yeah, if you can do a high-level update of just where we're at today and how this has progressed forward following.
Absolutely. So I think the first thing I'd say is I'm not overly concerned with the audit outcome. I think it's a good audit which highlights the position we find ourselves in, which is that we're doing the best we can with what we have, pretty much. We've got some good checks and balances in place, and if you go through the detailed audit, it goes through the reasons for some of that limited assurance. So for example, with the driver induction and the van declaration forms, we haven't had signed receipt of those during the pandemic because we've been doing all our inductions and those processes at distance for social distancing. So just reflecting on the outcomes from the audit, we know we need more monitoring and fleet management, especially with regard to corporate controls, such as the use of the vehicle app, and more widely in terms of planning for future electrification and corporate level management of fleet. And in the additional resources request we put into the budget process, we asked for some resource to lend towards this in terms of a fleet admin officer. And my plan is, and that's now been successful through the budget process, is when we bring that fleet admin officer in, we'll be able to push some of the day-to-day admin tasks into that role, such as the van declarations, and pick that up in a dedicated resource, which we don't have now. So we'll be able to control that much more fully. But what we'll also be able to do is create some capacity in our budget and equipment monitoring officer, who currently manages our fleet for us, alongside many other tasks. But by pushing some of these tasks into the fleet admin role, we can free up some of her capacity to work on sort of corporate fleet control and planning more widely. And that will include future planning for electrification of fleet, the logistics tied into that, but also with reference to the mobile app, we use it very fully within Street Scene, but some other departments don't use it. At the moment, we don't have someone who's in charge of fleet across the piece for the council, and so it's difficult for us to require others to use it. So changing this role slightly and reviewing the job description of our budget and equipment monitoring officer will allow us to have that person who's responsible and make sure that those systems, those checks and balances we have are used correctly across the piece. So that's our plan for that. We've already made the changes to the letters as outlined in the audit, and we'll be rolling those out this year. And as part of that, I've also asked my team to check on the locations of all our vehicles and where they're taken overnight, because as the audit highlighted, they should only be taken home where there's a business benefit. And we want to start again with that and look at where these things are, but also we need to do that in preparation for planning a switch to EV, because we'll need to look at on-street charging or charging at home. I think that more or less covers everything that was highlighted, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
That's great, thank you, Andrew. Members, does anybody have any questions? No, I think we're happy to note the plan, and thank you, Andrew, for your update, and move on to agenda item 8, which is the internal audit plan and charter 22-23. Back to you, Alistair.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, so the purpose of this report is for members to approve the audit plan and the charter. So there's two things I'm looking for approval from members. So just to reiterate, obviously internal audit is just one source of assurance that the audit committee can get to gain an overview of how good governance, risk and control is in the organisation. And obviously we want to make sure that we're looking at the right areas. So this is the opportunity for members to consider what we are looking at or plan to look at over the next 12 months. Okay, so agenda page 32. So this just gives you a brief overview of the things that are taken into account when we pull the audit plan together. I would like to mention that, as ever, we will try and keep the plan as flexible as possible, and we are operating an agile approach and operating what we would call a 6x6 plan. So this means we've allocated out audits for the first 6 months of the year, that's quarters 1 and 2, but we will re-review what priorities need to be brought in from the rolling plan for quarters 3 and 4, and that will be discussed with senior management in more detail, what priority areas should come into that. And again, members of the audit committee, you are welcome at any point, any time in the year to or suggest areas that should be included onto that rolling plan. Okay, so moving on to agenda page 33. So this is the high level risk assessment that we've undertaken and what we've taken into account to kind of set our priorities. And we look at this each year, and we consider obviously input from various managers as well. And we try and make sure that we cover this in the medium term, not necessarily that we're going to cover all these areas in any one given year. So without further ado, I'll probably move on to the areas that I'm seeking approval for. So this is on agenda page 37 and 38. So as I mentioned, we're operating a 6x6 plan. So Appendix A highlights what we're planning to do in quarters 1 and 2. And given the level of changes that happened to the plan throughout 21-22, quarters 1 and 2 are pretty much made up of the reviews that were deferred. So obviously these were agreed and discussed with relevant managers as those reviews were deferred. We've also factored in the follow-up reviews that we said we would. So you can see that the small works and services contract follow-up is scheduled in there too. So that is the basis of what we've got in for quarters 1 and 2 at the moment. Then scrolling down onto agenda page 39, this is Appendix B, and this is the rolling plan. So this will form the basis of what will come in potentially for quarters 3 and 4. As I say, it's not set in stone and it will be discussed with senior management. And I would welcome the input from audit committee members, not necessarily now, but throughout the year, it can be added to make sure that we've captured everything that we need to. And you will notice where possible, we've tied all the reviews back to where they link in with a corporate outcome or a corporate risk or operational risk. So you can see how those risks are being covered. You will also notice we do have the healthy organisation themes there. So just to reiterate what those are, again, to make sure that we have a broad coverage across the organisation, we've got healthy organisation themes, and we would like to make sure that we try and cover some of those theme areas in any given year. So corporate governance, financial management, people and asset management, contract and procurement, for example. So it's just trying to make sure that those areas are covered to give a good breadth to the audit plan. So those are in there again for information. So that's the audit plan that I'm seeking approval for. And then the final part that I'm seeking approval for is Appendix C. So this is the audit charter. So as it states at the top of the charter, this sets out the nature, role and responsibilities of internal audit within the authority. It's a key document to be approved by the audit committee, and it should be approved annually as deemed by the public sector internal auditing standards. For a matter of assurance, our charter is examined as part of our external assessment to make sure the coverage is correct and right. And there are no changes from our audit charter from the previous year when you approved it. So hopefully that gives you some assurance that what's in there is correct and right, that it should be okay for approval. So at this point, I'd welcome any input from members before we approve the plan.
Thanks, Alistair. Councillor Barrow, I think there was a thumbs. I'm going to take it as a hand.
It says hand, but yes. Couple of questions on the audit plan for the first 2 quarters, and one's a general one. I think in previous years we've had the number of days per area that may be spent on these audits, so we have an idea of, in a way, how much in depth it's going. So if there's a 5-day audit, then it's not as in depth as a 20-day audit for each one. And of course you can't on every graphic put everything on it, but maybe just send round to the audit committee this plan if it's agreed, and how many days that are planned on it. And also the question I have, being an accountant, I spotted potential audit areas in the ongoing bit, IR35. That's a lovely piece of legislation, but why would we be looking at the intermediaries legislation with regards to our business? Or is it because some of our staff, maybe senior level, or contractors may be working through their own limited companies? So, 1, can we have dates? 2, why IR35?
Good questions. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We do normally share the plan that also includes days, and so that will be posted upon the audit committee document library. So I'll make sure that is done within the next couple of days, so you've got visibility of that. Yeah. And IR35, it's one of those areas. I mean, local authorities do from time to time use consultants, some more than others, and obviously that can pose a risk if they're not used correctly in terms of the status and how they're used. We have looked at this in a number of other local authority areas and has highlighted some significant issues in terms of how consultants have been used. So for us, it's just flagging it as a potential area for further discussion with senior management. And it might be that East Devon's one of those authorities that, in terms of use of consultants, is quite light. And so the risk is, to some extent, a light. And it might be not an area that we pick up, but it's just to make sure it's on there for us to consider. Because, as I say, it has been identified at other authorities as a risk area.
So it's only on consultants, it's not staff?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I think that's a good question. I can't see any other hands, so I think I'll just move these from the chair then, that the members approve the internal audit plan for 22-23 and also the internal audit charter. So if you'd like to use your ticks, crosses, or whatever updates been applied this time to change them.
That's 3 votes in favour of noting the report, Chair.
Thank you. And then on to agenda item 9, the audit finding report, Grant Thornton, and I'll hand over to Jackson, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. And sorry I was a few minutes late. I've had a day of audit committees today, so you're my third. And the reason for that, I'm probably going to hand over to Beth in a minute to let her do a bit of talking, if that's okay. If I just briefly set out the report in front of you and its basis. So members of the committee who've been on here for a while, would have seen previous iterations of audit findings reports. This is one of our key deliverables in terms of our audit, and it reflects the work we've undertaken on the financial statements of the council for the 2021 financial year. We have 2 main responsibilities: an opinion on the financial statements and an audit in terms of value for money arrangements. This specific report covers the financial statement responsibility area. You'll have seen from the report that in the introduction, there were a few areas where we were still finalising some of our procedures, and I'll let Beth pick up on that in a moment. Some of the areas that were also shown as outstanding are things such as the signed letter of representation, which is an agenda item following this item, and also receipt and review of that final version of the signed statement of accounts, which can only be done once we've discussed this. So there are still some areas of work that are underway, but we've completed a significant amount of the audit. There are some findings and adjustments as a result of our audit work, and they're set out in the appendices that I will let Beth run through now, if that's okay.
Thank you, Jackson. So starting on the 3rd page of our report, so the numbers for our reports in the bottom right-hand corner, the slide that is titled Headlines. This, as Jackson mentioned, sets out the areas that we are still yet to complete. This was at a point in time when we submitted for papers, so we have had some movement, which I'm just going to update you on briefly. We've received various responses on the housing revenue account, journals and grant income that we were waiting on at the time of writing. And whilst we still have a number of smaller queries in other areas, the key areas that we still need to complete our detailed testing on include land and buildings and other associated property, plant and equipment assets, investment properties, the completeness of expenditure, other expenditure testing, fees and charges income testing, and debtors testing. In the main, the majority of our testing in all other areas is now complete, and the queries that are outstanding relate to smaller clarifications or confirmation of adjustments within equity accounts. So there has been some movement since the drafting of the report, which is always positive. On the 4th page of our report, we do briefly set out that our responsibility is twofold, as Jackson said, and we set out the fact that in terms of value for money arrangements, we will be undertaking our work in the coming months, and we'll be reporting on that within 3 months of signing of the audit opinion, which is in line with the NAO's updated deadline for that work. The work is about to get underway, and we have a colleague who will be starting on that imminently, and we've arranged initial introductory meetings in the coming week in order to introduce him to officers and to start that work. Moving on to page 6, I just wanted to highlight the materiality levels for our audit. This is the thresholds that we set, which we utilise to test and to undertake procedures. The materiality threshold has not changed from our audit plan. So the report that we presented to you last year, there were no changes when we received the final draft financial statements that caused us to amend that materiality. So those thresholds remain the same, and they are on a similar basis to last year and therefore similar values as well. Pages 7 through to 9 cover off our significant risk areas, and there is detail included in here about the risk itself, a commentary on the work that we have undertaken or are undertaking, and any findings to date alongside any conclusions if we've been able to draw those at this point in time. The one thing that I wanted to draw your attention to here is on page 9, where we've identified an error in the prepayment of pension contributions, and the council is currently working this through in the accounts in order to amend for that. What we identified was that the council's pension liability on its balance sheet and its pension reserve had the same values when the council was making an early payment of pension contributions that, once spread across a 3-year period, should mean that those two items on the balance sheet differ in financial value, and they only catch up to be the same value in that 3rd year, which is the final year of the prepayment. So officers are currently working through those changes and are making those amendments, and we are yet to review those on our side. Page 10 of our report picks up on a couple of specific areas that we wanted to highlight to you. The first one is in relation to the COVID grants that the council spent huge amounts of time and effort administering over the last, well, nearly 2 years now. The accounting treatment for these grants is needs to be assessed on a grant by grant basis, and the council has undertaken this work. But in the draft financial statements, whilst the team had correctly allocated grants between principal or agent bases, they had unfortunately included all of the agency grants within the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, so therefore had recognised all of the gross expenditure and the gross income, whereas these grants should not be recognised as income and expenditure within the accounts, and they should only have a debtor or creditor position recognised at year end. This has meant that there's a £67 million adjustment to the gross income and the gross expenditure, but the good news is there is no impact on the net position of the comprehensive income and expenditure statement. So while they are big number changes, it doesn't actually impact on the bottom line. The other item that we want to draw your attention to is having identified that in the current period, there was a need for a reclassification of some investments between short-term investments and cash equivalents. We actually identified that this also related to a couple of prior periods, and so therefore requested that this was updated because the values involved were material, and the prior period accounts have been adjusted for £2 million restatement between those two balances. It relates to the timing and the length of an investment. So based on the council's policy, any investment that is for a period of time that is less than 3 months should be treated as a cash and cash equivalent. Anything that is longer than 3 months should be treated as a short-term investment. What had happened is the assessment had, instead of being based on the actual length of the total investment, it was being based on the total time left in that investment between the year end and when it was due to mature. So it just meant that the policy was being applied in a slightly different way. So we challenged on that and identified the error, which is in the process of being adjusted. It will mean that the final set of financial statements will have a third balance sheet associated with them that will restate those balances as at the beginning of last year's opening period, so the 1st of April 2019. Pages 11 through to 14 pick up again on the significant risk areas, but come from the perspective of the fact that they involve estimation uncertainty, and we talk about the key judgments and the estimates in relation to those items, what work we have undertaken, and our assessment of each of those estimates. The majority of that work is still in progress. But one area that I wanted to draw to your attention is actually on page 15, which is the estimate slide in relation to the minimum revenue provision. So whilst this is not a material balance, it is a balance that has caused a lot of interest in recent months, years or so, with some fairly high profile cases of councils not providing a prudent level of minimum revenue provision. So as a result, audit firms have been looking into this in more detail. Our initial review of the East Devon calculation has identified a couple of things. Firstly, there is no charge being made over capital loans, and the council has a few capital loans, primarily in relation to the Exeter Science Park, and it is our view that, in line with the statutory guidance on minimum revenue provision, that MRP should be charged on those capital loans, and that we have also identified that while the policy for MRP is in line with statutory guidance, the actual calculation was being undertaken on a method that is only allowed for capital expenditure that occurred before 2008. So the approved policy, we've found no issues with. However, the application of that policy and the actual calculation of the values is being done using a slightly different method. The finance team is still working through an updated calculation in order to provide us with a difference between the current MRP charge and a potential final MRP charge. What we think at the moment is that this is unlikely to be a significant movement in the MRP charge, but it's something that we want to raise with you because it is a very topical subject at the moment. Moving on, page 16 covers off some of our communication requirements. There is nothing here that I wanted to draw out particularly. Page 17 covers our work in relation to going concern, and as an organisation that will continue to provide services to the people of East Devon for the foreseeable future, we have no concerns in relation to going concern. Page 18 covers our other responsibilities, including the work we undertake as a result of whole of government accounts, matters that we report by exception, and certification of the closure of the audit. Again, there is nothing particularly unusual there that I wanted to draw out to members. Pages 19 and 20 cover off a little bit more detail about our value for money work, which, as I mentioned, will be getting underway shortly. We've identified one area where we feel there is a risk of significant weakness, which is an area where we will focus some of our attentions. But as we explained when we brought the audit plan to committee, we will be focusing our work on the three areas that value for money covers, which is financial sustainability firstly, governance is the second area, and then the third area is economy and efficiency and effectiveness. That's an excellent tongue twister there. So those three areas are where the main elements of our work will focus. We will be discussing with officers, we will be reviewing various different financial reports, we will look into performance monitoring and various other things like that, and we will provide a detailed report called the Auditor's Annual Report, which will be the output of that element of our work. Page 21 picks up on independence and ethics, with on page 22 the non-audit fees that we as a firm have charged East Devon for being reported, and associated safeguards that we put in place in order to make sure that we can still maintain our independence. And then from page 24 onwards, we move into the appendices. So Appendix A covers the action plan. These are the control points that we've identified as a result of our audit procedures. I'm pleased to report that there are no significant action items that we have identified, a couple of best practice and a few medium level action points that we have identified, and management have provided responses to each of those on pages 24 and 25. On page 26, we follow up prior period recommendations to ensure that they have been implemented, and we're pleased to report that all three that we reported in our 2019-20 audit findings report have been implemented. And then Appendix C from page 27 through to 29 covers off the adjustments, the misclassification and disclosure errors that we've identified. And then you will see on page 29 that there are not at present any unadjusted misstatements, and there are not any unadjusted misstatements from the prior period that we need to consider either. On page 27, I just wanted to highlight the two adjustments that we currently have confirmed that will be made to the statement of accounts. The first one being a move between short-term investments and cash equivalents in line with the prior period adjustment that I mentioned earlier. this is an adjustment of the current year balances from the draft accounts to the finalised accounts of 23 million between the two lines on the balance sheet. It doesn't impact on your bottom line, it's just a reclassification between two classes on the balance sheet. And then the second one is the COVID grants adjustment that I also mentioned earlier, again, having nil impact on the provision of services, however, being an adjustment to reduce both the income and the expenditure by £67 million. Slide 28 covers off the misclassification and disclosure misstatements that we have identified and confirmed, and that we've had confirmed have been adjusted, as you can see from the far right column in that table. I wasn't planning to talk through any of those in detail, but I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. On page 30, we set out the fees for the audit and also re-summarise the non-audit fees. Our total proposed audit fee is still to be determined. This is as a result of the fact that we have extended responsibilities this year in relation to value for money work, and we're yet to complete that. So once we have completed that, we will be discussing with Simon as the Section 151 officer and agreeing any fees with Simon before seeking any additional fees through PSAA and receiving their approval as well. Included in the remainder of the report is in Appendix E a draft text of the audit opinion, which we anticipate will be an unmodified opinion. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Jackson. Anyone got any questions? Yeah, I think that's a good outcome. I think we really need to note at this stage as it's draft, so we'll move on to the next item, which is the approval of the 2021 Statement of Accounts and Letter of Representation. Over to John.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Beth. Yeah, so the following the external audit report, an update there, the Statement of Accounts are presented to you for adoption pending those items. So as the audit points within my report is handily being covered by Beth there, I will move on. The one thing I would like to highlight other than that is that the report itself confirms that the financial outturn position for 2021, as reported to the Cabinet back in July 2021, is not changed throughout the preparation of the audit. So that remains the same. So I wanted to highlight that point. So yes, the report is actually requesting the adoption of the accounts, and the accounts to be signed off following the audit matters that are outstanding and concluded. And yes, as been mentioned, the letter of representation also needs approving and signing. So yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Not that there's many people to ask. So the recommendation is to adopt the 2021 Statement of Accounts and delegated authority even is given to the Chair of Audit and Governance and Strategic Lead of Finance to sign when all matters are concluded, and that the letter of representation be approved and signed again by myself and Simon as Strategic Lead Finance. So if we'll just take a vote to formalise that, please. That'd be excellent. There we go. We've got three. We've got everybody. Swiftly moving on then to agenda item 11, full risk review November to December 21, and my script says that's you, Simon, whether you like it or not.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate that. Nothing much to add to the report in that this is a full review. It was completed sort of the end of December. So it is slightly dated coming to you now by a few months. So a couple of things have moved on, but reading through prior to the committee, I think it's all still relevant. You did ask previously that we try to split up the presentation of the risk register so we could do it in chunks to your committee. We've done this one as a whole one purely because of the way the timing of your committee's work, and we've done a full review. But in future, we will try and do that part, part presentation, if you like, to give it more manageable for your committee to go through the risks. We have taken on board comments previously from the committee regarding it being more up to date and relevant. So that message has gone out to the services. I think the chair's already spotted one ode reference to an officer who's no longer with us, so we'll try and pick that up. I do apologise. But in the main, quite pleased with how services have responded and have been through in quite a bit of detail to make it more up to date and relevant in terms of the actions and the risks themselves. The report does highlight a couple of areas in terms of high risks, operational level. One, and again, these have slightly moved on, but members will be fully aware through other reports to the committee. So you've got the issue of LED. So you'll know yourself, Chair, through the work of the forum, the additional funding and the risks regarding LED. And we're now agreeing a budget. Well, we've agreed a budget for 22-23, and the reports coming through the forum to mitigate the risks there. And in addition, there's a report that will come forward to Cabinet on our refuse and recycling contract and regarding the additional pressures and costs with that service. But those are the two high risk areas. Happy to take any questions. There's a lot of detail there for members, but happy to cover off what I can, Chair.
No, thank you, Simon. As you say, it'll be split up going forward. I think we've done a few of those in the past now, so that's helpful. And yeah, you're right. You know, I've whinged about various bits of this in the past, and I've had a look through it over the weekend, and it's a massive step in the right direction. I think it's fair to say. So, thanks to everyone involved in that part of the process, because I appreciate it's tedious, but it's something we need to make sure we've got sorted from the outset. Jamie, Dean, any questions? Or Jack even? No, I can't see any questions, so I think we're happy to note that report then and move on to the next item, which is 12, the Statement of Accounts 21-22 and Review of Accounting Policies, back with John.
Thank you again, Chair. So now looking forward to 21-22 year end, the accountancy team are already busy preparing for that year end. We're out talking to budget managers, preparing for cut-off in only 2 weeks' time, reviewing the balance sheet amongst many other tasks. But it's also good practice to seek the approval of the accounting policies that we'll be working to. So the report itself gives some useful background details. But for 21-22, the Code of Practice has only seen some very minor changes. So therefore, the accounting policies remain the same for the coming year. The report itself highlights future changes, and in there it talks about IFRS 16 moving out to 22-23, but it's actually likely now to be pushed out even further to 23-24. So that's a very recent possible update following consultation. So we're away on that one. So to confirm, the 21-22 accounting policies remain the same. They're aligned to the Code of Practice. So yes, happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, John. I can't see any hands, so I'll move to the recommendation to approve the accounting policies for the 21-22 Statement of Accounts, please. Got 2 in favour, we'll take that. On to agenda item 13, the RIPA update. The RIPA Senior Responsible Officer advised that there has been no request for RIPA authorisation since the last committee. And agenda item 14, Audit and Governance Forward Plan. Are members happy to recommend the forward plan for approval? I think we can just go straight to a vote on that one. Well, Dean, sorry, did you want to have a comment? I was really trying to cut a corner.
It won't be long. I'm fine with the forward plan. Do we know where we're at with the scoping for the look at Seaton Jurassic? on the internal audit. I meant to ask earlier, but
yeah, that's fine. Alistair, if you're still with us, I know it's on your internal audit plan.
Yeah, just to update on that. Yeah, so the audit brief has been agreed with officers and sent out to the relevant members. I think you've got a copy, Sam. I think a copy has been sent to you. So we've started work on that. I mean, if other members of the audit committee are interested in seeing that, we can make sure that's circulated as well.
yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Okay.
On that basis, with the audit plan, agreed. That brings our meeting to an end, and I'd like to thank everyone, including any members of the public watching online, for taking part. However, can I just remind all those present that the supporting officer will confirm the meeting is no longer being recorded or